This is Kathleen Joyce, and I'm broadcasting for ERC Data Plus. I am the Vice President of Marketing. I'd like to welcome our audience today from around the world. We have a number of registrants who represent companies in various parts of the globe. And with that said, I'd like to turn over today's event to our primary speaker, Marjorie Derven, who will be discussing with us today's topic, Best Practices in Onboarding. Marjorie.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending upon where you're joining us today. Basically, what we want to look at is what is the definition of onboarding and how do you create a business case in your organizations. We'll look at what are some of the key challenges that we've learned across multiple organizations and industries for integrating new employees and leaders. We'll share a timeline for onboarding, how you can create a process. And we'll look at some selected best practices, things that are very practical, that have been real-world tested, that really make a difference in terms of integrating employees successfully. We'll look at how some of the factors that you can consider to build a business case in your organizations, and we'll wrap up by looking at some lessons learned, and we'll take some summary questions, but as Kathleen said at the beginning of the webinar, we will be accepting questions throughout the session. A definition of onboarding. We really look at onboarding as being a comprehensive process that begins even before the employee starts, and then it unfolds over weeks or months. Depending upon the level of the employee, it may run as long as 6 to 8 months or even a year for a very senior person, and for someone who manages multi-incumbents, multi-functions. For someone who's an individual contributor, it may be 30 to 60 days. It's really needs to be a multi-pronged solution for integrating the employee not only into the organization but into their role and giving them the tools they need to be successful. And it is in fact a key business imperative. It's not just a nice to have. So what we would say that it's not is it's not a one-day orientation program, although often that onboarding does encompass an orientation program, which would be more of the kind of the macro picture of the organization. It shouldn't be HR driven, and we'll talk a little bit more about that during our session today. It should really involve multiple stakeholders in the organization and be a process. And then the last point that I want to make here is that it shouldn't be something that is done to the employees. They need to play an active role throughout the process. Let's just introduce you a little bit to Hudson Research and Consulting and ERC Data Plus, and then we're going to find out a little bit about our attendees today. Hudson Research and Consulting was founded over a decade ago, and we focus on organizational and market research. We work with a wide variety of organizations and industries. And in addition to onboarding, other solutions that we offer to our clients include competency models, sales force effectiveness, and performance management. And Kathleen's going to share a little bit about ERC. Kathleen?
Thank you, Marjorie. ERC Data Plus has been around almost as long as Hudson Research and Consulting. We are primarily a technology company. We help organizations to find and qualify talent through our integrated technology solutions that include applicant tracking, not surprisingly, onboarding, as well as executive assessment tools and survey tools. We provide these over software as a service platforms. Some of you might think of these as being cloud-based, that allow our clients to conduct candidate sourcing, screening, tracking, and onboarding using tools that are specific to their needs. As Marjorie said, what we'd like to do next is find out a little bit more about you. So what you'll see in a moment is a poll that would allow us to find out more about what kind of organizations you represent. I'm going to give you a few minutes to even just a few seconds, to tell us more about the organization that you represent so that we can in some ways fine-tune our presentation for your needs. Okay, we've got some results coming in. A little more than half of you have voted. Just use your on-screen tool right there to just toggle in. Okay. About 80% of you have voted. Not surprisingly, the majority of you do represent corporations, but we have a good contingent today representing nonprofit organizations and a few representing consulting firms. And if you represent an organization that you don't see there among your choices, that's something that is other, please tell us via the chat tool what you represent. Okay, I'm going to close the survey, so you'll be able to see the results and get a sense of who you're sharing this event with today. Okay, again, as we say, most of you represent corporations and a fair number of nonprofits. Okay, another thing we'd like to ask about today are the practices that your organization currently have in place. You'll see another poll, this is our second poll, asking you to tell us more about the way that your organization is currently handling onboarding. This is a snapshot of your present-day organization. Similar tool. This one you don't have to worry about another. We'd like to know if you are indeed already doing any kind of an orientation program. Are you indeed doing a comprehensive onboarding program, or neither of the above? Okay, it looks like the majority, and I'm going to share this in just a moment, we've got about 76% of our participants voted so far. Okay, I'm going to close the poll and share the results. But it looks like a good two-thirds, more than two-thirds of you actually are doing what you have described as an orientation program, but not yet a full comprehensive onboarding. So that being said, I think, Marjorie, we know where we need to go today.
Okay, great. And what's great is that we have a number of people that are involved in comprehensive onboarding, and we would invite you to share some of your best practices in the chat as we go through the webinar today. So let's look at some of the key onboarding challenges. Michael Watkins, who's done some really wonderful work in onboarding, the first 90 days, and several other books and Harvard Business Review articles, has estimated that over 12 people are impacted by the arrival of a mid-level manager. So it's not just an issue that's going to impact the new employee, it's really having a ripple effect throughout the organization. But starting with the new employee, some of the kinds of questions that that individual is going to be asking is, do I feel welcome? Will I be successful? Will I have the tools and resources that I need? And can I make a meaningful contribution in this organization? And of course, surrounding that employee are people up, down, and across the organization who are also wondering, how is this new person going to have an impact on me and my function? So the manager is going to be very concerned with how they can promote the success, and is this person going to help to fit into our culture? Peers and colleagues are going to want to know if they can work well with the person. Is he or she competent? And how is this going to affect my objectives? Customers are going to be very concerned about, is there going to be an uninterrupted flow of service that they've expected in the past? And direct reports are going to be very concerned about what the person's going to be like as a new boss, and can they trust this new person to be competent and caring, and how will my role change as a result of this new person's arrival? We know that in today's world, as many organizations have restructured, there's more of a flattening of organizations, and there certainly is a need for cross-functional collaboration across all organizations, and given that fact, we really want to build onboarding with that in mind. So let's take a look at some of the key factors related to onboarding. There's a lot of facts out there that indicate that even though we are coming out of a recession, that many employees are quitting their jobs, and with the economy rebounding, turnover is expected to further increase. In other words, there's a feeling that there's untapped demand of people who maybe have been sitting in place because they didn't feel that they had an option to move, and now as the economy is improving, they're going to move. So what that means is that we're going to see a lot more turnover, and people need to be effectively onboarding people in your organization. We also know that baby boomers are going to be exiting in large numbers, which means that those positions are going to have to be backfilled. And of course, jobs are more complex than ever before. Every organization has been faced with massive change and increased need for collaboration and innovation, and all these things are really combining together to say that onboarding is truly a business imperative. The onboarding research also supports why this is so important. One source estimates that 46%, nearly half of newly hired employees, fail within the first 18 months. We've got to do better than that. So organizations really need to, it's so costly, not only the opportunity cost, the direct cost, so it's a cost-effective solution to invest in effective onboarding. And Michael Watkins has estimated that at the executive level, the cost is over $2 million. Of course, the cost is less at a lower level in the organization, but it still is extremely high. We also know that the benefits of doing it right, according to Aberdeen, are that the best-in-class organizations demonstrate increased retention rate and shortened time to productivity. They also, best-in-class, also are more effective than average or laggard organizations in terms of getting support and buy-in from the organization. We'll be spending a little bit of time on that issue at the end of our webinar in terms of how do you build the business case in your organization so that you can obtain that executive sponsorship. Let's look at some key principles. You want to build the alignment. Make sure that your onboarding is reflecting the culture of the organization, the strategic imperatives of the organization, building a process that begins prior to the employee even getting there so that everything's put in place so that they can begin being productive as soon as possible. You want to establish accountability so that multiple stakeholders have some skin in the game, that they also see that they have a responsibility. It's not solely the responsibility of the hiring manager, nor solely the responsible of HR. There's multiple stakeholders, as we said earlier, that really are going to be very, very affected by that new person's arrival. And so what you want to do is establish what are the milestones, what do we want to see happening at key points, and what are the outcomes. This shouldn't be based on activity, it should be based on demonstrated results that you want to see at key intervals. And then finally, another key principle is building, using multiple learning approaches. We know people learn in a lot of different ways, so some of it may be instructor-led, some of it may be on the job. You may be using some social networking tools. We've done onboarding with global general managers around the world who felt very isolated, and social networking tools were used to help them build an effective network that they couldn't easily build because they were all in remote locations. So now I'm going to share with you a timeline. Oh,
Tell me.
We have a poll.
Yes, we do. We want to find out a little bit more about the onboarding objectives that your organization has. And this, I think, is especially interesting considering that such a majority of our group today are not yet actually doing more formal onboarding. They're doing something that probably could be more qualified as orientation. So I'm going to give you a minute or so to tell us what your objectives are. And here it's not only a present-day snapshot, but maybe even project a little bit as to what you would like to see your organization able to accomplish with an onboarding program. Okay, we've got about 30% of you have voted. As soon as I get a larger percentage of you to respond, then I'm going to let you know what the results are. This is interesting. We don't have as clear a majority so far. About 70% of you have voted. And, okay, I'm going to close the polls in just about 5 seconds. We've got over 80% of you have voted. Must be a few folks out there that are undecided if they're not voting. Okay, this is good. I'm going to close the poll, and I will share the results with you all. And Marjorie, this is interesting. We've got about 36% of folks telling us that they hope their onboarding will enhance their overall organizational performance. Another 31% are looking to improve new hire retention. That probably goes to some of the dollar impact you talked about earlier. And 27% tell us that they want to promote new hire engagement or assimilation. Relatively small number are actually looking to increase productivity through their onboarding results. What do you think of those results?
Well, I think it's interesting that the majority are saying that the most important is enhancing overall organizational performance, which I think really does underscore what we started off talking about earlier, which is that it is a key business imperative. It's not just about that one individual joining the organization. It's something that's critical to how the organization is going to be able to move forward over time. Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Thank you, Kathleen.
Okay.
So let's take a look at an onboarding best practices timeline. Kathleen is going to be sharing kind of a bookend of best practices timeline, talking first about the pre-arrival stage, and then she'll be sharing at the back end how you can build in metrics and create that accountability and track the results. And I'll be sharing with you some best practices kind of in the middle, which is defining the process early on in the first couple of weeks, creating a platform to enable the new employee to build critical relationships and involve those important stakeholders. We'll also look at another best practice, which is implementing peer coaching, which has been very successful in a number of the organizations we've worked with. And then we'll look at an innovative process that we've implemented, which is an automated business dashboard, which enables a new employee to understand what is the key business situation I've inherited, and what are the important business levers that I have available to me. In other words, what are the things that I'm going to do early on that are going to put me on a trajectory for success. And then we'll also look at what are the things that you can do to engage the new employees so that the onboarding is not something that's being done to him or her, rather it's something that they are playing an active role in throughout the process. Kathleen's now going to talk a little bit about the pre-arrival best practice.
Yes, thanks. You know, at ERC, one of the things that we've examined very closely is the impact that onboarding practices can have even before the new hire arrives at your door. You know, we've taken a look at the impact that tools that allow you to process forms in advance of day one can have on several levels. You know, first of all, engagement of that soon-to-be employee, that new hire. Getting them involved by letting them start reviewing policy manuals, procedures reviews in advance of their start date. Getting some of the paperwork that's required, whether it's their benefits enrollment, their payroll and direct deposit forms, and so forth. Of course, all the tax forms, federal and state level. You know, all of those forms can take up a significant chunk of time on that first morning, and perhaps interrupt that flow that you want to have in terms of them beginning to really exercise the enthusiasm that most new hires are going to have on day one. On another front, you know, it's something that we've learned from our clients is very important from a profitability perspective because of the fact that these hires, new hires are processing forms in a digital and a virtual format, we're able to create a more efficient and cost-effective format. Most forms cost out at about $15 per form. You multiply that times the number of forms, times the number of new hires you may have in a given year, and it can become a sizable investment just to get them up and running. And so, we do recommend that where there are tools such as VRC offers, that you provide virtual onboarding, paper processing, and form processing tools.
That's great, Kathleen, and I think it is so important. The last thing you want to do during this initial honeymoon period is throwing a lot of paper at someone. That's the wrong message that you want them to have when they first walk in. So let me dive into the first best practice that HRC is going to share, which is really defining roles and responsibilities and creating an overall process. If you look at the, let me see if I can get if you look here on the left-hand side, you really want to define when the different aspects of onboarding are going to take place, what needs to happen, and who needs to be involved and why. So for example, here we have the first phase, which really encompasses the pre-arrival and the first couple of days, and the outcome should be making sure that the employee is welcome. You're expecting them, everything's ready for them, and so forth. Phase 2 is really the first couple of weeks where you're really encouraging the employee to kind of set down some roots and to start to really feel, I've made the right choice, this is someplace I feel I can make a difference in, I can do my best work here, and it's going to make a difference to the organization. And so what you want to do here is help the new employee to build that very, very important network and become very integrated into the organization. And then in the next phase, which would typically cover 2 to 6 months, is really where you're starting to focus on making, contributing to the overall department or function's effectiveness, and really focusing on ongoing learning, and most importantly, actually making a contribution. So just one moment, and we will share our next best practice, which is promoting critical relationships. You want to build important relationships up, down, and across. So, for example, helping the individual to align with their boss. Really to create a business plan based on the most important objectives and to align on goals. Why am I here? Why does this position exist? What am I going to be doing? How am I going to make a difference? Another option is to work with a peer coach who can serve and kind of provide a day-in-the-life perspective. What does this job really look like? And most importantly, help to act as a conduit for information in a very low-risk relationship. Some other important relationships are peers or subject matter experts in the organization. Like, for example, let's say the individual is coming into an HR role. Do they need to be working closely with legal? If it's a general manager, is that person going to have to be working very closely with the finance department? And so what you want to do is give the new employee some tools that will enable them to establish those productive relationships right from the beginning. And the new employee has an important task here to demonstrate to others that he or she is someone that can be counted on, that this is someone that has some competence, and also needs to understand the others, their cross-functional peers in terms of where do our objectives overlap, where do they diverge, how do we best work together. So that you want to have the new employee asking some critical questions that will build common ground and establish some shared goals, and really create that feeling early on that, wow, this new person's really going to make a contribution. And then in terms of the direct report team, if that's relevant, if the person is coming in a managerial role, what's very, very important early on is that they have to start making an assessment of the strengths and development needs of their direct reports. What does the talent profile look like in this position that they've inherited? Are there any gaps? Are there any problems that they're going to have to be addressing early on? And you want to have them building trust and respect. And one of the things that I've learned over the process of building onboarding is helping new managers to understand the importance of waiting before they jump in and make a diagnosis or an assessment of their direct report. Don't rely too much on one or two people telling you the story, kind of, you know, take the jury is out position early on, but demonstrating a strong leadership role and understanding that you are gathering information and starting to create a diagnosis of the talent that you've inherited. Another best practice is involving multiple stakeholders in the onboarding. As we said earlier, with the need for cross-functional collaboration, flattened roles, it can't just be the responsibility of HR or the hiring manager. And so what we would recommend is that you really define the multiple roles for different people to play. What does it need to look like early on? We've shown you here a section for the welcome and first couple of days, but throughout the onboarding process, who are you bringing into the process? What are the things that they need to be doing, and what are the outcomes that you expect? What should happen as a result of these early interactions during the onboarding process? We talked earlier about the importance of having executive sponsorship, and that's really a key part of making sure that you can engage multiple stakeholders in the process so they understand what role they're playing. Now we're going to take a look at, we have another poll, your relationships in your organization.
Yes, we will. We have a poll that's coming up on your screen right now that asks you to tell us more about the importance and the key relationships that you hope to impact through effective onboarding. Again, use the polling tool that you see there on your screen and let us know what you think are the most important relationships to be impacted by a good onboarding program. Oh, we've got a majority emerging here. We've got about a third of you have voted. Let's get a few more votes in, and then we'll share with you the results. Oh, actually, all right, all right, we've got about 65% of you have voted. I'm going to give a few more of you a chance to vote. And then I will close off the polling in about 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Let us share the results. As I mentioned, we've got a majority here. You should be seeing the results now. Majority being that managers are perceived as being the most important relationship to be developed through effective onboarding. Peers come in at about 25%. 13% direct reports, 10% external clients. You know what I find interesting here is we really didn't give you the opportunity to choose all that apply. You had to pick the most important. So what do you think of that, Marjorie?
Well, I think it's interesting that what this is traditionally, that's always been the case, that the most important has been the manager. But my own perspective from conducting and designing onboarding in multiple organizations is that more and more people are working autonomously, they're working virtually, and this role of the peers is going to be more and more important to the success of the new hire and indeed the organization. But I certainly would agree that the manager plays a very unique role in terms of setting the goals.
Okay.
Here's another best practice, which is implementing peer coaching. And the reason that it's a great thing to do is to establish a low-risk relationship and really allow the new employee to kind of see a day in the life, have someone that they can ask silly questions to and not feel embarrassed, or you know, they can. The peer coach is someone that they can ask any question of. There's a couple of factors that really make this successful, and one is matching the peer coach and the coachee effectively. A couple of factors that you may want to consider. One might be that, of course, the coach needs to be someone that has an interest in playing this role, somebody that is enthusiastic about it. Should also be someone who's a high performer, someone that's going to represent your organization well. It may also be someone that you want to select to play this role because you're going to be moving that coach into a more senior leadership role in the future, and this is a way to kind of test the waters. A key factor in terms of making it work is making sure that you provide some guidelines and some training. And what I mean by that is not over-engineering the process, but rather providing an appropriate level of guidance about what makes it work. So examples might be having a webinar of what makes a successful peer coaching relationship, what does good look like. Another example might be guides. You may have some virtual training for people that covers things such as effective communication skills, establishing a contract with the coachee in terms of how long is this relationship going to, what's the duration going to be, who's going to be initiating contact, how will we know we've been successful, and so forth. And generally, the duration for the peer coach is typically the first 2 weeks to 1 month. And another best practice, and this I think is pretty innovative, is using a business dashboard. And this is an automated process to zoom in and zoom out. A recent Harvard Business Review article talked about this concept of like a camera being able to zoom in on the details and zooming out so you can see the big picture. And we know that a big problem for many new leaders, new employees, is that they never, in fact, have an opportunity to make a diagnosis of their situation. From day one, when they walk in the door, the expectations are that they must deliver and must perform. And that certainly isn't going to go away. The expectations are there that they need to do that. The problem is that if they never have an opportunity to make a diagnosis about where they're going to make a difference, it never happens. They fall into an activity trap. I had a client who compared it to being an air traffic controller, where basically these managers in this organization were functioning to prevent any airplane crashes, but they were not really driving the agenda. They were responding to crises, reacting to situations as they occurred. But in order to be effective in today's world, people really need to be able to first understand what are the key challenges, what are the key opportunities, what are my manager's priorities for me, and how will I understand that I'm making substantial progress towards the goals that have been set. So this tool, which I'll show you in a minute, it really enables you to make that diagnosis while you're contributing by asking the right questions and building key relationships. So basically what this automated tool looks like is it's a process where the new employee has a series of questions that they need to answer over the first 30, 60, or 90 days. It might be questions like, what does the talent that I've inherited look like? Where are we from a sales perspective in terms of achieving goals? Where are we from managing the P&L perspective? Where are we from a product commercialization perspective? If it's an HR role, where are we in terms of turnover and some other key metrics? So depending upon the role, it's asking a series of questions that the new employee needs to go and find out the answers to. And this is where they need to obviously tap into cross-functional peers and subject matter experts. They're brand new. They don't know the answers to this question. But these questions give them a disciplined way to get into the weeds and understand all the different things that they need to understand. There's a lot of moving parts, but then what this tool also enables them to do is to obtain roll-up data where they're able to see the big picture. What are the trends? Where are we on target? This tool basically uses red, yellow, and green like a traffic light. Green is where you're really meeting or exceeding expectations. Yellow is where you're right on the dividing line. And red is where you're really in a danger zone. And at the end of the 30 or 60 or 90 days, the new employee uses this roll-up data to generate an action plan that he or she would then present to his boss about, this is my understanding of the situation. These are where I intend to focus my time, my resources, make my investments, etc., and get alignment. Hear what the manager has to say about this action plan, make adjustments, and then they're really aligned and the individual's able to be a lot more strategic than they could have been without using this dashboard. A couple of innovations that some of our clients have helped us to include are having the manager identify key priorities by clicking on a red box so that the new employee sees right from the get-go what are the most important things I need to focus on. Obviously, I need to be doing everything, but what are the things that I need to be addressing, particularly in the first period of time. Another innovation is including some pop-up boxes so that if someone is rating a particular business lever in the red zone, what happens is that there's a box that pops up that gives them a series of questions or tactics that point them in the direction of how to get out of the red zone and into the yellow and green zone. So those are some innovations. Other clients have used this dashboard, which is really intended for onboarding. They've actually decided to use it as part of their performance management process because it's so focused on the right things. So lots of opportunities to do some interesting things here. Last best practice I'm going to share with you today, but it certainly is not the least important by any means, is engaging the new employee. This whole process shouldn't be something that's being done to the new employee. They should be taking an active role. This is an example of a 60-day planning guide where the new employee can figure out what are some key goals they want to undertake, what are some resources that they're going to need, who are their key relationships, and how are they going to foster greater understanding and collaboration with these. Other ways that you can engage the new employee in their own onboarding is providing interview guides so that they understand what are some key questions that they want to ask. Also preparing key stakeholders so that as the new employee meets with their stakeholders, they're prepared with examples of important business documents, trend lines, things that are going to help accelerate the new employee's understanding of this current situation that they've inherited. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kathleen, who's going to share with you a best practice related to the end of the process.
Yeah, thanks, Marjorie. Well, at ERC, one of the feedback items that we've gotten from our clients is that they do want to know what their investment in onboarding has yielded them, and our response is typically just ask, because if you don't ask, you won't know. And we do have a tool called First Word, which is our new hire survey. It's a web-based interface. It allows you to check in with folks at the 30-day, 60-day, 90-day time mark, whichever is most appropriate for your organization, to get feedback via an online interface that is very candid. It can be quantified across employee groups to get a sense of how they are climbing the learning curve, how they're adjusting to the culture within your organization. I'll give you a look quickly at some of the questions that a lot of our clients do use, but this is a really flexible tool. A lot of the questions that are included in the new hire survey can be adapted and adjusted to the needs of a given organization. You can ask about a new hire's understanding of their individual goals, the company's goals, how they feel about the training that they've received. Another thing that we've had a lot of clients include was whether, based on their experience in the first few months, they would refer friends and colleagues from earlier in their lives to work for your company. That can be really important from a recruiting perspective. And so the new hire survey that we provide, First Word, can be very, very useful as part of the sort of wrap-up to or transitioning for your onboarding process.
Great. Before we get into building the business case, Kathleen, I just wanted to ask, are there any questions that have been coming up so far that we can address before we get to the end?
Yeah, let's take a look. Well, one of the questions that we've had come in via chat was, how long should the onboarding process take, Marjorie? Can you provide our audience with some insight on that? I mentioned 30, 60, 90 days, but is that, is there any way to determine what's best for your organization?
Well, I would say that there certainly is a question related to the organization, but in addition to that, there's also questions related to the role. And if the role is more senior, leading multi-functions, multi-incumbents, then the onboarding naturally is going to need to be more robust and longer in time, and the payoff is going to be greater because this person is having a broader impact, a greater echo throughout the organization. So some of the answers for how long onboarding needs to be depends on what is the role. Mm-hmm. And what is the investment that you want to make. We've kind of presented today a number of different tools that you can use depending upon what it is that you're trying to accomplish in your organization. But I would say what's really important is to really look at what is the role, how complex it is, how strategic is it to the organization's objectives, and then make a determination for how long you need that onboarding to be so that the person can be fully productive.
Great. Okay, another question. Should the process change depending upon whether someone is being hired from inside the organization or from outside? In other words, promotion, let's say, of an internal candidate.
I think that's a great question, and I'm so glad that came up because we really didn't talk about that. And in fact, onboarding is not just for external hires. Onboarding, this process is completely relevant to someone who's being promoted into a new role. It's obviously some of the elements such as introducing the person to the culture and things like that, or showing them how your computer systems work, are not going to apply. But when someone is coming in to a new role in the organization, that still is going to be very, very important in terms of making sure that they're successful. So I would say that when someone is transitioning to a new role rather than coming in from the outside, the onboarding is going to need to be a lot more role-specific than relating to the organization, and it can probably be somewhat abbreviated to when you're bringing in an outside hire. Any other questions that is kind of general themes?
We'll give you another shot at questions when we get to the very end. Okay, we've got a few more slides. We are, we have about 8 to 10 minutes left, so let Marjorie get back on track with building your business case.
Thanks, Kathleen, and thanks for that great question. So let's talk about building the business case. If you buy into this concept that onboarding should not be totally HR driven or driven by the hiring manager, and you're going to involve multiple stakeholders, how are you going to make that happen? Well, you're going to need to get sponsorship and buy-in throughout the organization. So here's just some questions that you may want to think about in your organization that will help you make the business case. Has the organizational strategy changed, which means that we now need to be much more systematic in how we're onboarding people? And is this position that we have in mind mission critical? Is there a need to accelerate productivity? Has there been a lot of turnover in the role, and that indicates that we're not doing a good enough job with the onboarding? When the role is highly visible either inside of the organization or externally with customers or external stakeholders, you've got to make sure that that person is well prepared and that they're going to represent the organization correctly and with a lot of impact. If the role requires extensive multifunction collaboration, which more and more is the case across organizations, you want to make sure that you're doing a great job with onboarding. And then are there opportunities for scale? Certainly with, if you have some roles that are just onesies and twosies, you still want to do a great job with onboarding. But if it's a job, if it's a roles where you're going to be bringing in a lot of people, that's also a great argument that you can make to your executive sponsors for why you need to invest in a robust onboarding process. Let's also look at some of the metrics that you can use to build your case. I'm just sharing a couple here, but which ones are most compelling in your organization will really vary. One might be time to productivity. How long does it typically take for someone coming into this organization to get up to speed and to get integrated? Is this a really tough organization, one that people find it's really hard to build those relationships? Do we have a lot of turnover? Have we had a problem in the organization with employee engagement, as evidenced by various surveys that we've done, maybe using the ERC survey process or some other engagement survey process that you have in place? As much as possible, if you can build in existing metrics within the organization, that will really help to strengthen your business case. And we'd love to hear from you if you have any other compelling metrics that you've used to create a business case in your organization for onboarding. We'd love to hear, and I'll give you a minute or two to see if any ideas come in.
Well, actually, we've had a question come in from someone, Marjorie, that would like to know, Jody would like to know, how do you measure time to productivity? That's your first bullet.
Okay, well, that's obviously going to depend a lot on the specific role. For example, let's say if the person's in a sales role, when are we going to, and is it a very complex sales task? Does it typically take 9 months? Is that how long our sales cycle is? Mm-hmm. Well, as we have a new person in place, is it taking people a year and a half to close these sales? Is the person in a call center, and what's their ability to be fluent with different questions that come in? What's their, how long are they able to resolve customer complaints? Let's say it's a multi-incumbent senior leader role. What are the things that are most important for this person to accomplish? Is it a turnaround role where we are having a problem in a particular region? Are we starting to see some evidence that this new person is turning things around? So I would say that the answer to the question of time to productivity is going to be very role specific. But most organizations, you would have an idea of what does productivity mean for this role, and if you have never really quantified time to productivity, I would suggest that it's something that can be done.
Okay. Well, we are coming up on our hour, and we do want to talk about some of the lessons we've learned over the course of today's presentation.
So one important thing is making the business case, ensure sponsorship. If it's not just being driven by one person in HR, but you have multiple stakeholders to make it happen, you've got to have senior managers that say this is important to us and here's why. Having said that, you also want to have one point of contact that's your process owner, someone that coordinates as new people come in, who needs to get involved and what do they need to have available. Involve and prepare key stakeholders around what's their role, really defining what does success look like and how are we going to enhance both relationships and results. And using blended learning, we know that people learn in multiple different ways. You don't just want to have paper or online tools. You want to have multiple ways to help the new employee to get integrated and focus on learning by doing, not something that's classroom-based, but rather using multiple vehicles like the business dashboard, the peer coaching, an interview guide for employees, multiple different ways to help that new employee get integrated and engaged and up to speed quickly.
Excellent. Okay. We can take maybe one or two more questions. I do have one that's come in about the extent to which a company can customize the process for an individual's learning needs. Is that a question that we can handle in some concise form right now?
Sure. I would say that because we are focusing on engaging the new employee, that right there is customizing it, because what each person's learning needs, like maybe they're coming in with a lot of the technical background, but they don't know that much about the industry, let's say. So it's really going to have to be customized to the individual. I would also say that the business dashboard enables you to customize it to a specific role, a specific point in time, and a specific individual that you brought in. So I think what's most important is treating that new employee as a person that we care about, that we want to engage, and that we want to welcome. So I think making sure that it's customized is really, in fact, the heart of this whole thing.
We have another question here that Nina asks, often onboarding processes start well, but how do you keep the momentum going over time? Does that go back to your recommendation that the dashboard can be used beyond the onboarding process?
Well, sure, it certainly could. The dashboard's just one part. I think what's really key is demonstrating over time how the onboarding process is making a difference. And believe me, when you're getting results, you're not going to have to keep making that business case again and again. People are going to see we're bringing in new people, and boy, are they making a difference in the organization. You also want to collect some metrics, as Kathleen was talking about earlier, so that you can show what a difference your onboarding process is making. So, this is true with any initiative in organizations, is making sure that they're sustained. Once they take hold and become part of the culture, it won't die out. It will become a practice within your organization. This is how we do things here. Mm-hmm. Great question. Thank you. Okay, last thing, just wanted to recommend a couple of reading resources that you may want to tap into. Just wanted to say that both Kathleen and I would welcome any questions that you have offline. I have some onboarding job aids that I'd be happy to share. So, there's lots of resources out there. There's a lot of different ways to go about this, but really what you want to make sure is that you're using a multi-pronged approach and involving multiple stakeholders for the best success. So we wanted to wish you the best of luck with your onboarding initiatives.
And thank you so much to you, our audience members. I'd like to thank Marjorie Derven so much for leading us in today's discussion. We've had a lot of questions come in from folks about the availability of these slides after today. And we will be sending you out a quick email that will provide you with information on how you can access a recorded version of today's events. Obviously, you won't be able to send us your questions after the fact, but we'll share with you the slides that Marjorie's brought with her today. We also would ask if you could just take 1 or 2 more minutes today, as this event is ending, to take part in a quick survey to tell us how it worked for you and what value you got out of today's event. So again, thank you so much for joining us for the best practices in onboarding, and we hope you'll join us for future ERC events. Thank you so much, folks.
Thanks, and bye-bye.